The Inquisitor sliced through the void, its immense hull gleaming like a dark star in the unbroken sea of space. Admiral Zephyr Drax stood on the bridge, his cold eyes fixed on the viewscreen ahead, where the blue-green marble of Earth hung against the backdrop of deep space. The ship's sensors hummed with the weight of the information they had gathered over the past days. It was all there, clear as day Earth was weak, too weak to resist. Another conquest, another easy victory for the Vrexian Empire. Drax's sharp mandibles clicked in satisfaction. His fleet, 20 ships strong, had conquered countless worlds in the past decade, each one falling without resistance, each victory enhancing his reputation as the most fearsome leader in the Empire. He had no doubt Earth would be the same. The humans were primitive, barely spacefaring, their weapons crude, their technology archaic by galactic standards. His fleet was unstoppable. The communications officer, Velix, broke his silence. "Admiral, we've received an encrypted transmission on a secured channel." Drax didn't turn from the screen. "Who is it?" "It's strange, sir," Velix replied. "The encryption is unlike anything in our database. It's not from any known government or military organization. The source calls itself the Whisper Network." Drax's mandibles clicked again, louder this time, a sign of his growing annoyance. "Whisper Network? Resistance propaganda, no doubt. What do they want?" Felix hesitated, fingers dancing over the console. "They're warning." "U.S., sir. They claim that Earth is protected, that there are forces beyond our comprehension guarding it. They say if we approach, we'll face consequences that will echo through the history of the Empire." The bridge crew erupted into laughter, the tension from earlier evaporating in the shared ridicule. Earth protected? By what? Drax scoffed. They were nothing more than a primitive species, barely out of their caves. "Put it through," Drax commanded, settling deeper into his chair. He had heard such warnings before, empty threats from dying species, designed to frighten conquerors. This would be no different. The transmission crackled to life, the distorted voice of a figure neither human nor alien, but something else entirely. "Admiral Drax of the Vrexian fleet, this is your final warning. The world you approach is under the protection of forces you cannot comprehend. Turn back now, or face consequences that will echo through your empire's history." Drax's eyes narrowed. The voice spoke with such chilling certainty, but it wasn't enough to shake his confidence. "Enough of this nonsense," he muttered, waving his hand dismissively. Cut the transmission, but the voice continued, unrelenting. "The humans appear weak because they choose to appear weak. The system appears undefended because they want it to appear undefended. You have been studying them for months, but they have been studying you for years." The bridge fell silent, an eerie stillness filling the space. Drax stood, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of disdain. He shot a glance at his communications officer. "Cut it, now." Velix complied, but the words lingered in the air, their meaning heavy and unsettling. Drax turned to his tactical officer, Jorix, who had been silent until now. "What's our intelligence on the Sol system?" Drax demanded, voice steely. Jorix, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, consulted his displays. "Standard scans, sir. Type G star with 9 planets. The third planet, Earth, is home to approximately 8 billion humans. Primitive industrial civilization, no faster-than-light technology. Their most advanced weaponry appears to be nuclear and chemical propulsion vessels. No orbital defenses detected." Drax nodded, his confidence unwavering. A primitive species. Nothing to fear. He turned to the rest of the crew, who watched him expectantly. "Plot a course for Earth. Full fleet advance. Let's show them what happens when a world attracts the attention of the Vrexian Empire." As the fleet shifted into formation, Drax felt a rush of anticipation, This would be easy. The humans were nothing frail, divided, incapable of standing against the might of the Vrexian Empire. And yet, even as his confidence remained unshaken, something deep inside him gnawed at the edges of his certainty. Captain Ilara Doom stood near the back of the bridge, her hands folded behind her back as she watched the view screen, her mind elsewhere. She had joined Drax's flagship with nothing but loyalty to the Empire, but in recent months, something had begun to shift inside her. She had seen too many worlds conquered, too many civilizations obliterated in the name of expansion. Earth's arrival on their radar had been no different. But now, with the fleet advancing toward the third planet in the Sol system, a sense of unease tightened around her chest. She couldn't explain it, but something didn't feel right. The warning, however absurd it sounded, gnawed at her. Drax was certain they would crush Earth easily. He had been right before, every time, and Earth seemed no different. But Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire was walking into something they didn't understand. She glanced at Drax, his features set in stone, his face a mask of superiority. They were about to find out if Earth was truly the easy target it appeared to be. But Ilara had a growing suspicion that the humans were hiding something that, if they didn't turn back now, would change everything. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace, the massive ships hovering at the edge of Earth's orbit. The planet's surface stretched out below, an odd mix of blue oceans and swirling clouds. Drax's eyes glittered with triumph. "Initial scans?" Drax asked, his voice cold as he turned toward Jorix. "Everything matches the reports, sir." Jorix replied, his tone devoid of the concern Ilara had hoped for. "Primitive, divided, no defenses detected." The tension built slowly, an unspoken unease crawling along the edges of Ilara's mind. She watched as Drax made his final command to proceed with the attack. Everything was set in motion, but, for the first time in her career, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The Vrexian fleet, now poised just beyond the orbit of Earth's moon, hovered in eerie silence. It was an almost unreal sight, the great ships, each one a titan of destruction, aligned in perfect formation, their massive hulls reflecting the distant light of the sun. The crew of the Inquisitor waited in tense anticipation, the hum of the hum. Ship systems the only sound breaking the silence. Admiral Drax stood at the forefront, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the planet below. He felt an overwhelming sense of superiority, the sort of feeling that came with knowing victory was inevitable. But Ilara, standing quietly at her station, couldn't ignore the tight knot in her chest. She had seen this scene play out countless times. The Empire arrives, conquers, and leaves another world in ruins. Yet something about Earth was different. She couldn't explain why, but she knew there was more here than met the eye. The warning from the Whisper Network echoed in her mind. You have been studying them for months, but they have been studying you for years. Ilara couldn't shake the chilling sense that this wasn't going to be as easy as Drax thought. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from Earth." Felix's voice broke through Ilara's thoughts. Drax, unbothered by the new transmission, waved his hand dismissively. "Put it through." "What now?" The communication array flickered to life, but this time, the image that appeared on the view screen was far more unsettling than anything they had seen before. It was a human young, calm, with short dark hair and intense brown eyes. She wore a simple uniform, without any visible insignia, but it was the cold certainty in her eyes that held the crew's attention. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of Earth Defense Control," the human said, her voice clear and unwavering in the view. "Galactic Standard. Admiral Drax, we've been expecting you." The words hit like a jolt of electricity, and for a moment the bridge fell into stunned silence. Drax's eyes narrowed. Expecting us? How could they know he was coming? Impossible. Drax muttered under his breath, stepping closer to the screen. "We have detected no evidence of any advanced communication systems. You couldn't possibly know who we are." Captain Chun's gaze never wavered, the corners of her mouth curling slightly into a faint, knowing smile. "We know a lot more than you think, Admiral. We know about your conquests, the worlds you've destroyed, the lives you've taken. We also know that you are about to make a fatal mistake." Drax's mandibles clicked in irritation, a sharp, impatient gesture. "Do not try to intimidate me. Your planet is insignificant, your species weak. You cannot stop us." Captain Chun's smile grew slightly, though there was no trace of mockery in it, only a calm, unsettling certainty. "We are not asking you to stop, Admiral. We're telling you to turn back. Earth is under the protection of forces you cannot comprehend. The path you're walking leads only to your own destruction." Elara watched as Drax's face grew darker with every word spoken. He had never been one to tolerate challenges, especially when they came from a primitive species. His pride, his reputation, everything was on the line. The mere suggestion that a single human was challenging him, telling him what to do, was a provocation he could not let go. "Enough of these threats," Drax spat, his voice rising. "You will submit. The Vrexian Empire will crush you and take this world for its own. You cannot defy us." Captain Chun didn't flinch. "We won't submit to you, Admiral. But know this fight is not just ours. It is the fight of every species you've ever conquered, every world you've destroyed. You're not just facing Earth. You're facing everything you've wronged. You've underestimated us all." Drax's blood boiled. The audacity of this human. How could she speak to him this way? To his crew, to the entire Empire, this was nothing more than the last stand of a doomed species. The warning was a bluff, a desperate attempt to stall what was already inevitable. "Enough! This conversation is over," Drax barked. "All ships, prepare to engage. Earth's defenses will fall before the might of the Vrexian Empire." Captain Chun's expression remained steady. "Very well, Admiral. But remember, you were warned." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a deep, unsettling silence in its wake. For a moment, Drax stood still, the weight of his decision settling around him. His crew waited, watching him for any sign of hesitation. But he gave none. His eyes flashed with the burning desire for victory, for conquest, for the unquestionable superiority of the Empire. "Elara," Drax said, his voice low, "plot a course to Earth's atmosphere. It's time to end this charade." Elara stood, motionless for a moment, her mind racing. Every instinct she had screamed at her to speak out, to warn him to reconsider. She had joined the Empire to protect what she believed was a just cause to bring order to the galaxy. But now, as Earth prepared for the inevitable onslaught, she couldn't help but feel that Drax's single-minded pursuit of conquest was leading them down a path of no return. Her fingers hovered over the controls, her eyes flickering between the view screen and the readings on her console. Despite everything, despite her doubts, she followed his orders. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the sinking feeling that Earth's defiance was only the beginning of something, much larger, something that would change everything. As the fleet powered toward Earth, Alara's gaze lingered on the pale blue planet below. The sense of unease that had taken root in her chest deepened. It was clear now that Earth was not the helpless victim they thought it to be. Something had been hidden from them, and as they neared their target, Elara could feel that they were about to awaken something far more dangerous than they could ever have anticipated. The fleet surged forward, and with it, the certainty of destruction. The Vrexian fleet, having crossed the threshold of Earth's orbit, moved deeper into the heart of the solar system, and the tension in the command center was palpable. Admiral Drax stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the slowly shrinking blue marble on the view screen. a sight that only a conqueror could view with such cold detachment. To him, Earth was nothing more than another world, to be claimed, a prize to be stripped of its resources and added to the Vrexian Empire's ever-expanding dominion. The thought of any force, no matter how small, standing in the way of this inevitable conquest was laughable. "Sir, Captain Elara." Dune's voice broke into his thoughts. "We're entering the gravitational pull of the planet. Sensors are picking up unusual energy readings around the asteroid belt." Drax didn't flinch. Unusual how? Our scans indicated nothing of note in that region. "Something's off, sir," Elara replied, her brow furrowed as she checked the data. "There's a faint power signature coming from there, as though there's something hidden in the belt. It's not large, but it's unlikely." Drax cut in, his voice cold and dismissive. "Your concerns are noted, Captain, but Earth's defenses are nothing but primitive. If they were capable of hiding something powerful in the asteroid belt, we would have detected it long ago." Elara hesitated, but did not argue. She turned back to her console, eyes scanning the readouts, feeling an increasing sense of dread. There was no denying the strange energy readings. She had been trained to spot irregularities in space, and this didn't feel like a natural anomaly. It felt like something intentional. The fleet moved into position, each ship taking up a carefully planned orbit around Earth's moon. Drax's voice rang out once again, commanding the attack formation. "Prepare to commence bombardment. Full force." The command crew began. The preparations, the atmosphere on the bridge, thick with the certainty of victory. But Elara couldn't shake the unease tightening in her chest. The asteroid belt seemed to pulse with energy, almost as if it was alive, waiting, watching. It felt like the calm before a storm. As the Inquisitor moved closer to Earth, Elara took one last look at the planet below. From this distance, it appeared to be a world of peace, a simple place, still caught in the throes of its own self-inflicted limitations. But deep down she knew better. No species that could call the vast expanse of space their domain remained isolated for long. Earth had hidden something, maybe not an army, but something far more dangerous. Suddenly, a loud bang resonated through. The ship, the bridge lights flickered. The entire fleet lurched, and alarms blared as a massive shockwave coursed through the Inquisitor. The crew scrambled for control, grasping at consoles and securing themselves as the ship rocked with force. "Report!" Drax barked, his voice rising in anger. "Incoming fire from the asteroid belt." Velix shouted, eyes wide with shock. "Massive energy signatures, energy beams overloaded our shields. We've been hit." Elara's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the screen in disbelief. There, emerging from the asteroid belt, was a massive structure, so vast, so imposing, it seemed to blend seamlessly into the belt's surface. It was no asteroid. It was a fleet of ships hidden, cloaked, and undetectable until the last possible moment. The energy signatures were now clear. Advanced weapon systems, far more sophisticated than anything Earth had shown in their reports. "Impossible." Drax's voice came through gritted teeth. "We didn't detect this. They were supposed to be defenseless." "Sir," Elara whispered, her voice betraying the shock she felt. This isn't possible. How did they hide this?" The unknown ships fired again, their energy beams cutting through space with surgical precision. The Inquisitor shuddered violently as the first salvo struck, its shields flaring and crackling under the impact. Elara felt a surge of fear rise within her as she realized that this was no longer an invasion. This was a fight for survival. "Return fire!" Drax shouted, his pride and fury combining into a storm of rage. "Bring their ships down. Show them the might of the Vrexian fleet." But the battle had shifted. The unknown fleet, hidden for so long in the asteroid belt, unleashed a torrent of firepower. The Vrexian ships, accustomed to overwhelming force, now found themselves caught in a web of precision strikes. Energy projectiles from the hidden ships lashed out, bypassing shields, causing widespread damage across Drax's fleet. Vrexian vessels began to falter, their systems glitching as they scrambled to adapt to the unexpected resistance. "Report!" Drax demanded again, his voice no longer the confident, commanding tone it had once been. There was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes as he turned toward his officers. "Their weapons are unlike anything we've seen," Velix replied, panic creeping into his voice. "They're using some sort of quantum disruption technology. Our shields are failing. We can't repel the fire. Why didn't we detect this? Why wasn't this in the intelligence reports?" Drax yelled. Elara, her mind racing, quickly pieced together the horrifying reality. The Whisper network, the warnings, had been real. Earth had been preparing, not just for a single battle, but for something far more intricate. This wasn't a primitive species. It was a species that had learned, evolved, and found allies among the survivors of the Vrexian Empire's conquests. And those survivors had helped them build a force capable of not just defending their world, but of holding off an empire far stronger than their own. "Admiral," Elara said, her voice shaking, "we've underestimated them. We've underestimated everything." Drax's eyes flashed with frustration, but even he couldn't ignore the reality before him. The fleet was buckling under the barrage, and Earth was proving to be far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. "Retreat!" Drax roared. "Withdraw! Full power!" But it was already too late. The fleet was scattered, cut off, and outmaneuvered. The asteroid belt had transformed from a silent graveyard to a deadly battlefield, and the planet below was no longer a helpless target. It was the center of a fight for survival, one that the Empire had no hope of winning. In the chaos of the battle, Elara felt a shift within herself. This was no longer a mission of conquest. It was a mission of survival. The humans were not the prey. They had become the hunters. And as the Vrexian fleet scrambled to regroup, the full scale of Earth's hidden defenses became clear. This was no isolated planet. Earth had become a symbol of resistance, not just against the Vrexian Empire, but against the entire cycle of conquest and destruction that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. In the midst of the chaos, Elara could no longer ignore the truth. This was the turning point. This was where everything changed. The Vrexians were no longer the predators, and Earth was no longer the prey. The universe was about to witness something far greater than a mere battle. It was the beginning of a revolution. The chaos of the battle raged on as the Vrexian fleet struggled to regroup. Damage reports flooded the command deck of the Inquisitor, the flagship of the Empire. The once pristine ridge was now filled with the wailing of alarms, the smell of burnt circuitry, and the low hum of emergency lights. Crew members scrambled to maintain control, but the tide had already turned against them. Drax's once unshakable confidence was now replaced with disbelief. How could this happen? He muttered under his breath, his hands clenched in frustration, as he surveyed the damage reports streaming across the console. We should have crushed them by now. Elara stood near her station, her mind still processing the revelations of the battle. The Vrexian fleet, with all its firepower and superiority, was being outmaneuvered by Earth's hidden forces. What had seemed like a doomed, primitive planet was now the center of a galactic uprising. Earth's defenses were nothing like the reports had suggested. They had weaponized the very heart of the asteroid belt. The Vrexian fleet was caught in a trap that had been years in the making. "Admiral, we can't hold out much longer," Velix said, his voice strained. "The shields are failing, and we've lost contact with several ships. They're being destroyed one by one." Drax stood rigid, fury and frustration boiling beneath. The surface. I don't care about losses. This planet is ours. We will break through their defenses. We've taken stronger worlds than this. Ilara's gaze flickered between the view screen and the data pouring in from the other ships. It was clear that Drax's resolve was crumbling, but his arrogance wouldn't allow him to acknowledge the true magnitude of the situation. The Empire's military tactics, based on overwhelming force and brute strength, were being rendered obsolete in the face of Earth's ingenuity and the network of allies they had secretly amassed. Sir, Ilara spoke carefully, trying to keep her voice steady, I recommend a tactical retreat. We need to regroup and rethink our approach. If we don't, we'll lose the entire fleet. Drax whipped around, his eyes flashing with anger. Retreat? Are you suggesting that we run from a handful of primitive humans and their pathetic excuse for a fleet? We will not retreat, Captain. We will destroy them. I will not be the one to surrender to a backwater species. Ilara's heart sank as she realized that no matter how much logic she presented, no matter how many warnings she gave, Drax's pride would always stand in the way of reason. He was a man who had built his career on unyielding dominance, and the thought of defeat was something he would not accept. But then a cold realization washed over her. Perhaps that was exactly what Earth was counting on. The humans were not only prepared to fight, they were prepared to outsmart the Empire, to break the cycle of conquest and destruction. They had seen it all before, and they had learned from the remnants of the Empire's previous victims. They knew what it meant to fight for survival, to stand against the overwhelming might of an invader. They had allies, knowledge, and strength that went far beyond their primitive technology. Admiral, Ilara said quietly, her voice shaking with an emotion she hadn't expected fear. The humans aren't just fighting us. They're teaching us a lesson. Drax turned to her, his face contorted with a mix of contempt and disbelief. What are you talking about, Captain? They are fighting for their lives. This is war. There are no lessons. No, Ilara said, shaking her head. This is something else. They are showing us how much we've lost, how far we've fallen. They've learned from us our tactics, our technology, and our mistakes. And now they're using all of that to destroy us. Drax's fury flared, and he slammed his fist onto the console, sending a shockwave through the room. Enough of this. We will not be beaten by a primitive species. All ships engage full power. Continue the bombardment. Crush them. The command was met with a flurry of activity, but Ilara noticed that the crew was no longer reacting with the same intensity. There was hesitation, uncertainty in their movements. She saw it in their eyes. The seed of doubt had been planted, and even if they didn't speak it aloud, they knew that something had shifted. They were no longer just soldiers following orders. They were part of an empire that was crumbling before their eyes. Ilara, Drax barked, his voice colder now. I need a full report. Tell me we can win this. Ilara didn't answer immediately. Her gaze moved to the screen once more. Earth's forces, far more coordinated than before, had now launched their final assault. Ships from every species that had suffered under the Empire's reign appeared on the periphery of the battle. These were the survivors, the refugees, those whose worlds had fallen to the Vrexian might. They had found each other, and they had found Earth. Together, they now formed a united front, using their combined knowledge and technology to dismantle the Vrexian fleet piece by piece. They're not just fighting us, Ilara whispered, more to herself than anyone else. They're united. They're fighting for something greater than themselves, for the future of every world we've destroyed. A sharp jolt of realization hit her. Earth wasn't fighting for survival alone. It was fighting for the galaxy, for all the species the Vrexians had wiped out. And that was something the Empire had never prepared for. It was something they could never have anticipated. The Inquisitor shuddered again as another salvo tore through its hull. The lights flickered, and the ship groaned under the strain. But it wasn't just the ship that was breaking. Drax's empire was crumbling, and Alara knew that there was no turning back. "Admiral," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper now, "we're not winning. It's over." Drax's eyes were cold, unreadable. "No, we're not finished yet." But even as he said the words, the truth of it settled over him. The battle was no longer about victory. It was about survival, and the Vrexian Empire was outmatched. The lesson had been learned, but it had come at a price far greater than Drax could comprehend. The final moments of the Inquisitor were filled with an eerie calm. The Empire's forces were beginning to fracture, and Alara, now fully understanding the magnitude of Earth's resistance, made her decision. She turned toward the command deck door, her eyes locking on Drax's one last time. "I'm sorry, Admiral," she said softly, almost apologetically, "but I'm not following you anymore." With that, she left the bridge, leaving Drax alone. In his crumbling empire, facing the consequences of his refusal to see the truth, the atmosphere on the bridge of the Inquisitor had shifted entirely. Once it had been filled with the calculated confidence of a crew poised to crush another weak species. Now it was consumed by uncertainty and panic. The vibrations of battle echoed through the ship, the sounds of shields failing, systems crashing, and explosions tearing through the hull. The crew moved mechanically, their eyes hollow with the realization that the empire they had served without question was now crumbling, and with it their own certainty. Admiral Drax stood at the center of it all, staring at the view screen, as Earth's forces closed in, their allies pouring from every corner of the galaxy. Every world the Vrexians had thought they'd subdued, every race they believed they had wiped out, was now united against them. Earth had brought together the remnants of the galaxy's survivors, and in doing so, they had transformed from a planet on the verge of conquest to the heart of a galactic revolution. "Status report," Drax demanded, though his voice sounded hollow, like he was speaking through a veil of disbelief. Velix, his communications officer, hesitated. "Admiral, the fleet is losing contact with several ships. We've lost at least half of our firepower, and multiple vessels are retreating or destroyed. The remaining fleet is in disarray." Drax clenched his fists, the bitter sting of defeat scraping at his insides. "What are we supposed to do now? We cannot retreat. We cannot—" His words trailed off, his mind racing for a solution, but it was becoming clear that no amount of military strategy, no amount of arrogance, would save them now. The reality was undeniable. Earth wasn't just defending itself. It was teaching the Vrexians a lesson they had never anticipated, that their empire built on conquest, bloodshed, and fear was an outdated model. Earth and its allies were showing them that unity, not domination, was the true power in the Kung. Galaxy. The ship shuddered once more as another wave of energy blasted through the outer shields, sending tremors through the deck. The lights flickered and alarms blared, but Drax remained frozen in place, his mind slowly coming to terms with the impossible. "I told you." Ilara's voice echoed in his mind, the words from their last conversation cutting through his thoughts. Like a blade, "We're not winning. It's over." He had ignored her warning, dismissed her doubt. Now it was clear that she had been right all along, and the bitter truth sank in deeper than any wound. He was not only facing defeat, he was facing the end of an empire dot behind him. The crew moved in disarray, and he could hear the soft murmur of their voices, the fear creeping into their conversations. The Inquisitor had always been a symbol of their dominance, but now it was just another sinking ship, caught in the wake of its own arrogance. Drax turned sharply, his eyes scanning the bridge. His officers, once proud, loyal now, looked at him with uncertainty. It was in their eyes. They had seen the Empire fall apart, and many of them were beginning to question their allegiance. He could feel it, the shift in their loyalty, as they watched the battle unfold, realizing that no matter what they did, the tide had turned. They were no longer the conquerors. They were the conquered. And the worst part was that Drax knew it was his fault. "Admiral," Velix's voice broke through his thoughts. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth." Drax barely reacted. "Put it through." The image that appeared on the view screen was Captain Sarah Chun again, calm and composed, the same faint, knowing smile playing at her lips. Behind her, Elara stood, her eyes hard but resolute. The words they spoke weren't laced with malice, but with something far more unsettling: understanding. "Admiral Drax," Captain Chun began, her voice steady, almost too calm. "We gave you a chance to turn back. We warned you, but you refused to listen. And now you face the consequences." Drax felt a cold knot twist in his stomach. "I should have destroyed you when I had the chance," he muttered, but there was no fire in his words. It was a hollow statement, empty and tired. "You won't stop us." "Oh, we've already stopped you," Captain Chun said, her gaze unwavering. "The only question left now is how you'll choose to move forward. The Empire you serve has no future, but we can offer you something else. We can offer your crew and the survivors a chance to join something new, something better. Something built on cooperation, not conquest." Drax's mind raced, but he couldn't find the words to respond. He had never been one to surrender, to yield to anything or anyone. But as he stood there, looking at the faces of the crew behind him, he realized that something inside him was changing. They had lost, and they had lost not because of brute force, but because Earth and its allies had shown them the value of unity. And now it was no longer about fighting for the Empire. It was about finding a way to survive. Captain Chun's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You've been warned, Admiral. The fight is over. You can either choose to fight for a dying Empire, or you can join us in building something new." Elara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. Drax saw the uncertainty in her eyes, but also something else: resolve. She had made her choice. "I'm sorry, Admiral," she said quietly, her words almost a whisper, "but I can't follow you anymore. You've led us to the edge of extinction." The finality in her voice stung, and Drax felt a wave of emotion, betrayal, anger, but also the smallest flicker of something else: regret. "You can stay with them, Elara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But know this: they will destroy everything you've ever known." Elara's eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't look at him with disdain, but with pity. "You've already destroyed everything we knew, Admiral. And now you have the chance to rebuild if you choose to." The transmission ended, leaving Drax alone in the silence of his failing ship. His crew was no longer looking to him for leadership. His empire, once vast and untouchable, was crumbling around him. He looked out at Earth, its surface now teeming with activity. Ships, once hostile, now stood united with those who had survived the Empire's endless conquests. What he had once seen as a weak, primitive world had become a symbol of something far more powerful. The strength of those who had been wronged, the resilience of the oppressed. Drax clenched his fists. The Empire was broken. But as he looked at Earth, he realized that the galaxy was no longer bound by the chains of conquest. There was another way. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to embrace it. The battle had ceased, but the storm of emotions in Admiral Drax's mind raged on. The Inquisitor lay silent, its damaged systems flickering weakly, as if it too had resigned to the inevitable. The grand fleet of the Vrexian Empire was now a shattered remnant, its once proud vessels scattered and disorganized, their combat capabilities severely crippled by Earth's ingenuity and the strength of its alliances. Outside the windows of the bridge, Earth gleamed in its quiet defiance, no longer a symbol of a world to be subjugated, but of one that had transcended the ancient cycle of oppression. Drax stared at the view screen, his hands resting heavily on the console before him. He had watched the Empire crumble under the weight of its arrogance, and now, for the first time, he truly understood the cost of that arrogance. It wasn't just the loss of ships or soldiers. It was the loss of everything he had believed in, everything he had fought for. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission," Velix said, his voice unsteady, as if he too were struggling to comprehend. What had just transpired? "It's from Earth. Captain Shun is requesting a direct line." Drax didn't move. He didn't want to hear any more from them, didn't want to face the consequences of his own mistakes. He knew there was no escape. The choice had already been made for him, and it was a choice that would define the rest of his life. "Put it through," he said, his voice hollow, devoid of the strength it once held. The image of Captain Sarah Chun appeared on the screen once more, her calm, composed demeanor still unwavering. Behind her stood a small group of representatives from the various species that had once been under the heel of the Vrexian Empire. They were now standing together, united not as enemies, but as equals, their expressions serious but hopeful. "Admiral Drax," Captain Sean began, her voice steady, "I know this is not easy for you. The path of the Empire has been one of conquest, one of absolute power. But now, that path has led to ruin, and we are offering you a chance to choose something different." Drax's gaze never wavered from the screen. He felt a strange mixture of anger and resignation well up inside him. How could they ask him? To choose? To give up everything he had ever known? Everything he had fought for? "I have nothing left," Drax said, his voice raw. "The Empire is destroyed. The fleet is in ruins. What do you want from me? My surrender?" "Not your surrender, Admiral," Captain Sean replied, her tone gentle but firm. "We're offering you a chance to build something new. Something that's not based on destruction, not built on the bones of the worlds we've conquered. We're offering you a place in the new Galactic Commonwealth, a federation of species that believe in cooperation, not conquest." Drax's mind reeled. A commonwealth? A galaxy without war, without oppression, without the iron grip of empires? The very thought seemed impossible, like a dream too wild to be real. And yet, as he looked at the faces of the aliens on the screen faces, that had once been crushed under the weight of Vrexian boots, he saw something he had never seen before: hope. "Why?" Drax asked, his voice shaky now. "Why offer me this? After everything I've done to you, to your people?" "Because, Admiral," Captain Sean said softly, "we believe in redemption. We believe that every being, no matter their past, deserves a chance to change. And we believe that you can be part of this change." Drax's breath caught in his throat. Redemption. The word echoed in his mind like a distant echo, something he had never thought possible for someone like him. But as he looked at Earth's leaders, at the faces of those who had suffered the most under the Vrexian Empire, he saw something else. They didn't see him as an enemy anymore. They saw him as someone who could make a choice that could shape the future. He turned away from the screen for a moment, his eyes closing as he considered everything that had led him to this moment. The years of conquest, the endless battles, the lives lost in the name of empire. Were they worth it? What had he truly gained? Nothing but destruction, nothing but the hollow, fleeting satisfaction of victory at the expense of countless lives. And now, for the first time, he saw the cost of that victory. The price was far too high. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, uncertain, but also something else. Sincere. "I've spent my entire life fighting for an empire that is now nothing more than a ghost. I've seen the devastation I've caused, and for what? A galaxy ruled by fear and power? Captain Shun's expression softened. It's not too late, Admiral. You don't have to keep walking the same path. You can choose another way. You can help us build something better. Drax looked back at her, and in her eyes he saw not the harsh glare of an enemy, but the light of a future he had never thought possible. A future where the cycle of violence and conquest could end, where strength could be used to protect, not destroy. I don't know if I can change, Drax said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I'm capable of it. You don't have to do it alone, Captain Shun replied. We'll help you. We'll help you every step of the way. The choice is yours, Admiral. The galaxy is waiting for leaders who will fight for something more than power. Drax stood there, staring at the screen, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. For the first time in his life, he was faced with a choice that was not about victory or defeat, but about something deeper, something more human. Help me, Drax said finally, his voice filled with quiet resolve. Help me make it right. Captain Shun nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. We will, Admiral. Welcome to the new galaxy. As the transmission ended, Drax stood there, staring at the empty view screen. His hands were no longer clenched in anger. They were open, ready to embrace the future, a future of peace, of unity, of redemption. It was not too late. The Vrexian Empire was gone, but there was still time to build something better. Something that would heal the wounds of the past and create a galaxy where all species, regardless of their history, could live together in peace. Drax wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time, he felt the weight of his past begin to lift. And for the first time in his life, he could see the dawn of something new on the horizon. The cold, infinite void of space seemed to stretch on forever, but within the depths of the Vrexian flagship Inquisitor, the sense of time had changed. No longer dominated by the relentless forward march of war, there was now an uneasy stillness, a profound shift. The once unshakable empire, the behemoth that had crushed civilizations beneath its boot, was no more. What had once been an unstoppable force had now become a humbled entity, learning to navigate a new path. Admiral Drax stood on the observation deck of the Inquisitor, gazing out at the stars. The view screen before him showed the galaxy in all, its majesty expansive, quiet, and indifferent to the crumbling legacy of the Vrexian Empire. Yet for the first time in a long while, Drax didn't feel the weight of his old ambitions pressing down on him. He felt uncertain, but oddly free. His once proud fleet had been reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. The remnants of the Empire's soldiers, broken and disillusioned, had begun to disperse, their loyalty fractured. The Inquisitor was now just one among many ships in Earth's newly formed Galactic Commonwealth, an alliance of worlds that had come together to rebuild, not through domination, but through unity and cooperation. The thought made Drax feel a strange sense of hope, one he had never allowed himself to feel before. Admiral, a voice called from behind him, pulling Drax from his thoughts. It was Captain Elara Doom, now standing by the door with a new insignia on her uniform, one that marked her as a representative of Earth's Interspecies Council. The same woman who had once been loyal to the Empire, now offering her guidance in this new era of peace. Drax turned toward her, his face still bearing the hardened expression of a warrior, but his eyes softer now, reflective. Captain, he said with a subtle nod, acknowledging her presence. How is the Council? He had spent days in deep conversation with Earth's leaders, learning their vision for the future. But he hadn't yet found his place in it. Slowly but surely, it's coming together, Elara replied. But there's still a lot of work to do. It's not easy to change centuries of thinking, Admiral. And not everyone is as ready to forgive and forget as we are. Drax sighed. The weight of his past, of all the lives he had destroyed in the name of empire, felt heavier with each passing day. Forgiveness is not something I deserve, he muttered. Ilara's gaze softened as she approached, her voice steady. No, but redemption is. No one is asking you to forget. But what you do from here on out, how you lead, will define you, Admiral. Drax nodded, but said nothing. Redemption, like peace, was an elusive concept. He wasn't sure he was capable of either. The scars of his empire ran deep, and though Earth had offered him a chance to change, a part of him remained uncertain if he could ever truly abandon the person he had been for so long. The empire is gone, he finally said, his voice hoarse. And now I have nothing left but the ghosts of my actions. Ilara stepped closer, her expression resolute. No, Admiral, you have a chance to build something new, to make right the wrongs you've done. And maybe, just maybe, you can help others see that the past doesn't have to define the future. Drax turned back to the view screen, his eyes reflecting the stars that stretched out before him. A new future. A future that Earth's leaders and even Ilara believed in, one founded not on the pillars of conquest, but on cooperation. But the truth of that future still felt distant to him, like an impossible dream. How could he, the one who had commanded the destruction of entire worlds, help build something that was built on hope instead of fear? He wasn't sure yet, but the glimmer of possibility was there, small and fragile, like a star just starting to burn. Ilara didn't press him further. Instead, she stood quietly beside him, sharing in the silence that now hung between them. Finally, Drax spoke again, quieter this time, almost to himself. What happens now? The rebuilding begins, Ilara replied, her voice firm with the certainty that had grown within her over the past weeks. The Commonwealth will grow stronger. But it needs you, Admiral. Your knowledge, your experience, your leadership. The galaxy will need to know that even the most powerful empires can change, that they don't have to continue the path of destruction. Drax met her gaze, his mind turning over her words. He had always thought that strength came from control, from dominance. But now he understood that real strength came from the ability to let go, to release the need to crush others, and to build something lasting, something meaningful, something that could unite rather than divide. I can't undo the damage I've caused, Drax said, his voice low. But I can help build something better. Ilara smiled, her expression softening. That's all any of us can do. It's not about erasing the past, Admiral. It's about forging a new path from. He nodded slowly, a new understanding blooming in him, tentative but real. The empire he had once served had been built on fear and war. But what they were building now, alongside the survivors of his past, was something entirely different. It was a galaxy that had learned from its mistakes, from the mistakes of people like him, and it was ready to move forward. Drax took one final look at the stars, at the future that awaited them. Earth and its allies had shown him what was possible, and for the first time, he believed it. The path ahead wasn't one of conquest. It was one of cooperation. A galaxy where every species, every civilization, had a voice. And as Drax stood there, surrounded by those who had once been his enemies, he realized that his journey had just begun. The Empire was gone, but the galaxy was still waiting for leaders who could shape its future not through power, but through unity. As he turned to leave the observation deck, Ilara following him, Drax felt a new resolve take root inside. The past would never fully leave him, but now he had a chance to build something greater, a new legacy. One that wouldn't be written in blood, but in the shared hopes of a galaxy united. The journey ahead would be long. But for the first time, Admiral Drax was ready to take that first step into the unknown.